And yes, your recording has started, Kip, so no problem there.
All right, welcome everyone to Uranus in Taurus, transiting through the third and fourth houses. First of all, our little housekeeping slide here at EAN. You can study with us 3 different ways. You can listen to our free weekly audio podcast, you can subscribe to our astro library, and you can enroll in our evolutionary astrology course. Here is the dates. Here are the dates that Uranus is in Taurus between 2018 and 2026. You can see that it's going to retrograde back into Aries for 6 months later this year and at the beginning of next year, and then it goes into Taurus for the next 7 years, full strength. Stay tuned. Here is just a brief little recap of some bullet points we looked at with Uranus and Taurus in the archetypes class. Here is where we are going to revolutionize self-reliance through exposing wherever we have insecurity. Here's where we will be evolving our inner relationship with ourself and our environment. Venus rules 2 signs. The rulership of Taurus is the inner side of Venus. This is the relationship with self. Its rulership of Libra is the outer side of Venus, which is where we have relationship with others outside of ourself. Of course, Uranus and Taurus will most likely bring a lot of sexuality shakeups, scandals, revolutions. Jupiter and Scorpio already started the Me Too movement. Where did you think we would have a porn star or an adult entertainment star suing a president of the United States? Jupiter in Scorpio and Uranus in Taurus following through will create even more interesting things to watch in our headlines. And of course, Taurus is about that survival instinct. And so Uranus in Taurus will have us observing the survival of all species on planet Earth. We could easily watch the distinction of some species. We could be putting in more effort to save other species. And of course, probably the area that most of us could be interested in with Uranus and Taurus is all about resources. Not just money, but anything involved with food, clothing, shelter, anything that's manifested into the material world. And with Pluto and Capricorn and all the wealth inequality that we've seen happening on planet Earth since the 1970s, it's quite possible that Uranus in Taurus will shake up a lot of the wealth accumulations and be part of the redistributions of resources in more equitable ways. I spoke about this in detail through public banking in the Uranus and Taurus cycles webinar that we did a couple weeks ago, or last week was it already? And of course, Uranus in Taurus is going to bring about a long-term potential to develop any new talents that we will use to create resources via job, career, that we will utilize in any resource accumulations as well. You can see on your screen some of the distortions of Uranus and Taurus. We can refuse to make any necessary effort. We can get involved in laziness and inertia. And of course, Uranus will come along and upset the apple cart even more if that's what we're going to do. That both Taurus and Scorpio can be involved in manipulation and possessiveness, that fixed modality that wants to hold on to something for security reasons. We can also see withdrawing, hermit, hoarding, being excessively materialistic. And of course, we talked about some of the species die off, and that could also be due to some starvation issues for some species and even humans across the planet, as we've had so much a disruption with war and refugees. There may be some survival issues that come up quite strongly in the news to bring about that choice of whether or not we're going to take care of the least of us or do the Taurian selfishness. I'm just going to worry about me. Stay tuned. Lots of stories will unfold. Now, the Scorpio polarity to Uranus and Taurus will always be there. You always look to the opposite sign and house of any forecasting, even natal, but we're talking forecasting here. You look to the opposite sign and house of a forecasting planet to get a deeper understanding of the archetypical sign and house the transiting planet is moving through. Now, the Scorpio polarity will also be emphasized whenever Uranus is retrograde, which is about 5 months out of the year. Scorpio is going to create those necessary cataclysms to expand our individual and collective perspective of the universe. In other words, Taurus will have to broaden its perspective of the universe. It can't stay cocooned in its little safe environment. Scorpio will blast it out to help it evolve. Scorpio polarity will also, as we talked about here, bring about those resource upsets and redistributions, mainly intending in natural law to have a more equitable sharing of resources. Let's see how this turns out over time, the next 7 years. And Scorpio polarity will trigger ethical debates because in this modern world of ours, and due to patriarchal distortions, spirituality and morality are always playing catch up to technology. Technology just races ahead, inventing this and that and everything without any inclusion or discussion about its implications from a moral perspective or even a spiritual perspective. And of course, we can have sexual scandals and possibly a new sexually transmitted disease or contagion that might bust out of there. In other words, viruses, bacteria, fungus, prions, they all mutate just as much as anything else does on planet Earth. AIDS, if you remember that, all came about when Pluto moved through Scorpio. That Scorpio polarity being of the element water is also really going to emphasize that necessity for clean water. And I think one of either the archetypes or cycles class, I spoke about how we're going to look at those, desalination plants, especially here in the United States. I didn't realize that there were 120 countries in the world that already had desalination plants. So in this case, we can look at the United States perhaps being in catch-up mode as fresh, clean water becomes more and more endangered through climate change, and we have to come up with other technologies for providing clean water. Distortions, Scorpio, power grabs, of course somebody stealing the money and the resources, expect scandals in regards to these wealth extremes and corruptions with money, etc. We can have of course, abandonments and betrayals in our relationships. We can have those who want to game the system. And in Scorpio as well, there can be the excessive misuse of resources too. Now, something I'm pointing out as we're doing this transit all the way around the 12 houses, we're going to be looking at a natal chart through each of these transiting houses. And everyone who's on planet Earth right now was born between, those are born in, still got some alive in the 1920s. They'll have Uranus disseminating phase to Pluto. But my point was, most of the souls on planet Earth either have Pluto in the last two Uranus in the last two phases to Pluto, or we have Uranus in the first 2 phases to Pluto. Many of us recognizing that we just got beyond these first quarter squares. And as we looked in the cycles class, 2018 to 2021, Uranus will make 7 first quarter bisectiles to Pluto. That opportunity to perhaps have some realignments with the evolutionary intents of Uranus and Pluto. Realignments meaning the more equitable sharing of resources with Uranus and Taurus. The increasing awareness that we have an interactive relationship to planet Earth via climate change. Take your issues and observe how not only Uranus bisectal Pluto, but Uranus and its waxing semi-squares to Neptune as well will bring about some opportunities to realign more naturally. Not fated, going to depend upon how many of us want to be active in bringing that about. So again, just wanted to give you some dates here, although I got to replace this is 1965-66 conjunctions. But you can just see with these dates. Now, oh, here's another thing. Uranus balsamic, last quarter balsamic Pluto. Uranus in the last quarter of the chart to Pluto is increasingly want to bring old trauma to the surface in order to heal it in some way. Uranus in the first quarter of the circle, away, moving forward from Pluto, will be about breaking free, really initiating liberation in some way. Doesn't mean we can't liberate ourselves in the last 2 phases. It does not mean we aren't healing trauma in the first 2 phases. We still are. But you could start to look at this for any of you who are practicing astrologers with charts and just look at the phasal relationship between Uranus and Pluto to get some foundations on each individual chart and how the soul is working about the process of healing trauma, really breaking free from the past and moving forward, etc. So if we want to look at Uranus and Taurus transiting through the 3rd house, the 3rd house is the Gemini house. It is active polarity, mutable modality, and the element of air. Uranus rules air sign, air house, Aquarius 11th. So we almost have a double signature in air here. It really starts to stir up the mental plane. So Uranus in this house transit is going to be about learning how to achieve inner security via changing our thoughts, changing our mental processes, changing how we think and ponder about things. And that will include thinking about how life is mentally processed. 3rd house, in their head, mind never slows down. The left brain, conscious mind just does not stop. And when Uranus is here, it increases all of that mental energy. It can increase nervousness. It can increase worrying about things, constantly thinking about what's going to happen, feeling on edge because Uranus does bring about the upsets and change with things. So it can be hard to feel secure and safe on mental levels when Uranus is in Taurus transit this house. Another thing that can happen with 3rd house energy, and especially to the degree we might feel traumatized by anything, is we can get stuck in what's called circular thinking. Have you ever had one of those nights where the same issue just runs round and round and round and round in your head, and you keep thinking about it again and again and again? This can sometimes be that mercurial third house Gemini energy. And so again, if any trauma comes along, any upsets come along with this house transit, we can just get fixated on thinking about something from the same perspective, and we will need that Scorpio polarity to help, bump us out of being stuck in the rut mentally. So with this Uranus house transit, it's going to be very important that we learn how to calm down the mind, that we can take a deep breath, that we learn how to trust the process of life that is always evolving and always changing. Uranus moving through the third house is going to be very similar to the Uranus in Gemini mini generation. And what happens here is left brain, right brain switching starts to go all the time. Left brain wants to analyze it. Right brain wants to abstract it. And we can just switch back and forth and back and forth and back and forth so that we never really process anything. And again, it can just create a chaos, in our mind. It can create a scatteredness. It can just, we lose track of being able to trust our intuition. And one of the things we have to do with the Scorpio polarity on the ninth house or in the ninth house is learn how to trust the intuition and right brain to bring the broader answer that then lets all those famous details kind of click into place and make sense rather than feeling like we're swimming around in chaos. So with this Uranus house transit, from time to time, we're going to cyclically go into the involution. We're going to turn inward. And typically this will happen when our brain is just saturated with information, or, we're, again, worn out from just worrying about something or going round and round and thinking about it again and again and again. Eventually that left brain and the conscious mind, it just gets exhausted. And then we go inward. And that's how we slow down the left brain and we reach over to that Scorpio ninth house polarity, and the intuition can pop through. Now, we can facilitate this process by learning an activity like meditation or yoga, or learning some physical activity that can help us calm down the mind. Going out and getting that daily walk if it's physically possible. Going to the gym, lifting weights. Or sexually, having sexual energy to help bring about some of that mental overload release. So what can happen with this Uranus house transit, and all of us are having to evolve self-reliance, including our own sexual self-reliance, providing for our own sexual needs. It is something that we all do on a natural basis unless we've been extremely distorted by the patriarchal and its principles, specifically religious principles. So as we've discussed, there gets to be a lot of mental excitement that can go on. And we must balance that with learning how to get into the physical body, Taurus. Uranus and Taurus through the third can't just run around in its head all the time. It's got to be Taurus grounded in the body. And so South Sex is a way we can ground ourselves through the chaos. It is also a way, again, in which we can have healthy mental release of all that excess thought. And oh, by the way, then that also allows the intuition to kick in and work better. And if we're looking at shared sex, sex with someone else, it has to be meaningful. Again, because it can be so chaotic and burst forth and die out just as fast with this house transit. That Scorpio ninth house polarity, we've really got to search for more meaningful sexuality with someone else. That includes sacred sexuality. It may be that for some people with this transit, Uranus third house, but even more Uranus in Taurus, that there might be some sexual exploring going on. Bisexuality, attraction to the same sex. There can be all kinds of sexual curiosities that can open up. They may be transitory on our way to developing androgyny on the deepest levels, or it's also possible that it could be something within the soul is ready to start shifting. Third house is gender orientation, and Uranus is bringing this up into consciousness to explore in some way. Again, sexual details can be as varied as the third house itself. You've got to observe and correlate the context in any given chart. Now, when it comes to resources, there can be wild swings with not just money, but with accumulating or releasing resources. I spoke about how on broad general levels, Uranus and Taurus will be teaching a lot of us to simplify our resources. We don't need as many resources as we thought we did before. Our values around food, clothing, shelter, our values around resources and money is going to be evolving. Well, with the third house, it's going to go up, down, up, down. It will ebb and flow. And through all of that volition with the material world being all over the place, Uranus and Taurus, it will keep throwing us back into feeling inwardly secure, regardless of how the outer resources are changing in our world. Again, consensus accumulates stuff to feel secure. Individuating recognizes itself as a resource. And spirituating consciousness is going to recognize the ultimate resource from which everything comes and reach for that inner security and trust that they will receive whatever they need and desire, however it is necessary for them to come through. It's reminding me of an old Louise Hay quote that I've said for about 30 years. Everything I need to know comes to me in my highest and best time-space sequence. And everything I need everything I need to know. I'm gonna Mercury. I got Uranus transiting the third house. Everything I need to know comes to me in my highest and best time-space sequence. And everything I need and desire comes to me in my highest and best time space sequence. I'm going to have to look this one up. Stay tuned. I'll mention it on another webinar. For some reason, I got my own left brain, right brain switching going on, and I can't remember a mantra that I've said for 30 years. How's that for Uranus in the third house? Another thing this house transit will do in regards to resources is balancing multiple talents, learning to do more than one thing. Maybe as Uranus was moving through the second house, you had one job that you did, for years and years. Uranus going into the third, maybe the job's no longer there. Maybe you're juggling 2, 3, 4 part-time jobs. Maybe you're juggling multiple part-time jobs because you want the freedom and flexibility with this house transit. So however Uranus stirs it up for you, it's like, oh, what is this providing me? Remember, Uranus and Taurus over the long run is going to be learning new talents, learning new things that can help us survive better on planet Earth. What we must be careful of with this house transit is the good old quote, jack of all trades but master of none. So if the instinct or desire or opportunity to learn something new comes along, what we want to work with through Taurus is staying with it long enough to actually create a talent that we can exchange for resources to survive and flourish. And of course, this last quote is one that Jeffrey Wolf Green put in his Pluto Volume 1 book. It works broadly for anything with Mercury, Gemini in the third house. And because Uranus and Taurus through the third can, make things so chaotic, it really is about recognizing my foundation is in movement itself. So there's going to be this back and forth energy between Taurus wanting to be secure and the third house and Uranus wanting freedom and excitement and flexibility. And so with this house transit, we're going to have those time periods where, again, the involution, we want to go in, we want to be quiet, we want to be still, we want to rest. And then those time periods where all of a sudden we get excited, we want to converse, we want to do, we want to share. And so learn to honor those triggers of when to rest and when to move, when to be quiet and when to speak. And that's how you will maintain your best equilibrium with inner security and self-reliance through this house transit. Now, of course, we spoke about some of these distortions. There can be the mental scatteredness. We can freeze up, the inability to think and process. Me not being able to remember my mantra. I think as everything I need to know comes to me, and everything I need and desire comes to me. No, that's still not right. See, I'm right there. Not trusting our intuition. Flightiness with resources. We can, Uranus and Taurus, all 12 houses can go through time periods of overspending. Taurus sometimes indulges. Again, it's not just one potato chip, it's the whole bag of potato chips. So sometimes it's not just spending a little, it's spending a lot. Uranus can upset the apple cart in that direction. And it can get chaotic with how we spend with our resources in this house transit, meaning sometimes we might have to learn how to stick with the budget, plan that budget, and stick with it. You know, the Taurian steadiness is going to have to balance with the need to be flexible. You know, you have to watch those tendencies of getting caught up going shopping with the girlfriends, and then because somebody else buys it, you buy it, and you get home and you go, well, what did I buy all this crap for? So really, you know, learning how to put some patience and forethought into this house transit and saying, what are my long-term goals with resources based upon what I value? All kinds of ways we can look at the details with this. Okay, so there's some bullet points for you with Uranus going through the third house. It's, you know, if there's something you feel that I'm not speaking up about, some archetype, by all means, type it into the Q&A board for Leroy, and we will definitely address it. Right now, however, we're going to move into looking at a chart example. And so, Leroy, if you could unmute our volunteer for the third house, and I will start environmental conditionings. This was someone who was born and raised in France, middle class, raised Catholic by atheist parents. I thought that was interesting. Both parents were psychologists. This individual also has a degree in psychology. She had a very volatile relationship with an unstable mother who ended up being an alcoholic. I think mom's still alive, quite older. And she was very close to her father. Her parents married and divorced twice. Married, divorced, married, divorced. So probably was a little chaos there too. She has an older brother, a younger brother. She immigrated to the United States in 1983 with her first husband. She herself has been married twice. She does not have children. I think she wanted them early on, but it just wasn't there, and you know, it just didn't happen. And now she's in a relationship with a partner who has 5 adult children, and she is in practice as a therapist, and she has many different techniques that she utilizes in her practice. And I'm just, I'm thinking, I'm going to say, I'm thinking that this person, I may be wrong. She's a therapist. Maybe she didn't get a degree in psychology, but I'm thinking she did. Do we have a volunteer live?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello there. Thank you,
Hi,
volunteer.
Mary.
Hello there. Hi. Let me just briefly point out to everybody that you are a Pluto-Leo generation. Pluto's retrograde in the 7th house, so it is really pointing over there to that first house for you. You have a South Node in Virgo. It's just moving out of a conjunction to Pluto. So, or excuse me, Saturn. I'm sorry. Feeling my 3rd house. It's just moving out of a conjunction to Saturn, and so you can still feel some of this fruition, relive, mixture of both in regards to some responsibilities, perhaps. Natal Uranus is over here in Cancer in the 5th house. So the ruler of Cancer by sign is the moon up here in a nice trine to Uranus. And the ruler of Uranus by house is the sun over here in this stellium of Taurian planets. Sun at 1 Taurus, Mercury retrograde at 6, and Uranus at about 8.5. Now, I did something with you as the 3rd house volunteer. You had said you used Placidus houses, but you would be kind of, you know, interested in looking at potpourri.
Yes.
Well, Let's play with this one. Look what happens to your chart with Potpourri. Moves the nodes into the second eighth, moves all of these Taurian planets in the third, already puts Uranus in the third house here, even though it's finishing up with Aries. You could actually look in your ephemeris and see when Uranus was in about 23, 24 degrees Aries and see if you noticed anything that went on in your life during that time period. And let me look it up for you. It would have been 2016 that Uranus went back or 2017 that Uranus would have went back and forth over the third house cusp with Potpourri houses. So we can kind of look at both, but let's go back to the Placidus houses for you because that's the chart you're familiar with. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're still finishing up some of the things that we spoke about in our class on Monday night with Uranus in Taurus in the second. I guess what I would like to say is as we looked through the slides, was there anything that was sticking out for you about the third house, even though I know it's not there yet, okay? But anything that you yourself are curious about or anything that was popping into awareness for you?
I mean, the need to calm down my mind, definitely. My mind is very active and I'm intellectually very driven. And I wrote a book. I have a lot of ideas. And so the need to definitely calm my mind and is at the forefront right now.
Part of this will come from the Mercury Moon opposition.
Yeah.
Part of it's going to come from Mercury being sandwiched between Sun and Mars.
Yeah.
And part of it's going to come from a South Node in Virgo, Mercury ruled, not to mention Saturn in Virgo. So you're quite right. You already have a lot of mental energy in the natal chart that Uranus will come along and shake up even more in various ways. I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you had another thought you were going to say?
No, I wrote a book in 2016 and it's doing well, and I'm thinking about writing another one. So it's also energy that I channel in my work quite well in a way. So I'm using it. So yeah.
Well, isn't that interesting? Published a book when Uranus Potpourri houses went into your third house.
Yeah.
I would say because you actually have planets here in Taurus, that as Uranus goes over your sun, it is definitely going to bring about changes for you in how you identify with yourself, how you see yourself, personality, changes. The intent would be that you hopefully become even more self-reliant, okay? Especially being a seventh house Pluto with first house polarity point, all right? It could be that you write even more. I didn't speak about, writing or public speaking with Uranus going through the third house. That's definitely part of all of the mental processes going on with Uranus moving through the third house. Yes, you could see yourself being sparked to write who knows how many books. If was your first book, was it a therapy book? What type of
on toxic relationships. So it's doing well. It's a bestseller, so it's good. It's in French. I published it in France.
Okay, so
and I teach also a lot. I lead seminars, so it could increase too.
Well, you can probably definitely look at all of that increasing as Uranus moves through your third house, okay? If you look at this from the potpourri, you see Taurus and Scorpio are intercepted. So that's something else that you can also just kind of observe back and forth between the two different house systems, if you want to. With you know, the Mercury and the Mars there in Taurus as well, I think a lot of it for you is going to be juggling all of the busyness and being proactive enough to just really take time out to calm down. There might, you know, that Taurian prioritizing based upon what is most important to you. Okay.
Yes.
Because it could, you know, Uranus will shake it up and it can make you quite busy. I happen to have Sun, Mercury, Neptune, 1 to 2 degrees Scorpio. So I'm going to have Uranus oppose all of that this year. And even though it's still in the tail end degrees of Aries, I myself sense all of the busybodiness. And I'm finding that I really have to have some discipline with space-time. Now, again, it's almost like, you know, you've got Mercury retrograde natally, Mercury's retrograde at the moment in Aries, okay? So, you know, for you, you might be able to flow with that energy, okay? But Uranus over Mercury can spark you mentally so intensely, it could disrupt sleep patterns.
Yeah.
Mercury transiting through the third house, the Mercury house, can disrupt sleep patterns. This is in general for everybody, okay? With Uranus in the third house. So again, whether it's yoga, whether it's hiking, meditation, sexuality, whatever you need to do to put a balance, to calm down with that Taurian energy, everything Uranus wants to excite. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah, Uranus over your Mars, this will then have you, all three planets will feel the Uranus transit independently and together, because, you know, there's only 7 degrees from Sun to Mars. That's close enough from the perspective of evolutionary astrology to be within orb of influence. So Uranus going over Sun, Mercury and Mars will feel it. Mercury, both Sun and Mars will feel it. Mars, both Sun and Mercury will feel it. So who am I? Where am I going? Mars? What do I think? What am I doing? There's just, you know, Uranus could bring a lot of opportunities for change. And it also then will oppose that moon in Scorpio as well. So what emotional insecurities come along for you? And then how do you try to breathe through and calm that energy down? You know, Taurus, Scorpio, they are two archetypes that wants everything to be nice and steady, nice and calm. And Uranus is going to just come in and stir that pot and say, you got to be able to be flexible and go with the flow, and you got to change, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. Juggling it all. A relationship, career, writing, you know, traveling probably is, you know, too. We didn't, you know, I didn't mention traveling in some of the archetypes, but, you know, that can be part of the picture with Uranus transiting through the third or the 9th house as well. And again, probably one of the biggest intents is going to be deepening your sense of inner Taurus self-reliance through all the chaos that's going on. If we look to your natal Uranus, okay, and the transiting planet is always, or the forecasting planet always relates to the natal signature. You know, you're part of that Uranus in Cancer mini generation that, for the most part, probably had emotional chaos in your early environment. You know, you said that with mom, you know, being, I think you said mom had her own psychological problems, you know, in addition to her instability, etc. Well, that has a pretty strong effect on a soul who has natal Uranus in Cancer and then in Leo, who sees me, who loves me, who can acknowledge me for who I am. Maybe your father saw you a little bit more than mom did, but you know, just the whole distractions of the home environment could have been quite chaotic for you. And if you want to, you can add in the fact that you have a grand cross. You're got the Chiron Uranus opposition. So the woundedness here with the whole family of origin. It is a square from Jupiter at 0 degrees Aries, and Uranus in Virgo is within orb of being opposing and squaring these planets. Now, in Porphyry houses, it turns out to be all fixed houses, okay? In Placidus, let's play with this. Ooh, we move into cardinal and fixed between the two of them. Tell me, do you have much background in studying astrology?
A little bit, yes.
Okay. So you've looked at your chart. Do you relate more to the Placidus houses, or is that just what your background studying is?
It's my background studying, and looking at the porphyry, I can relate to that because my mental, my third house is very active, so definitely. So I could also relate to porphyry. I don't know how you pronounce it exactly.
That's it's porphyry.
Porphyry.
If you're not familiar with this, you know, Jeffrey Green, when he did his astrological research 3-4 decades ago, he felt that potpourri was a better psychological description of what was going on. I just happen to have found his studies at the beginning of my astrology, so I never really knew any other house other than potpourri. Evolutionary astrology works with any house system.
Yeah.
It's you working with what feels comfortable for you. If you're willing to have me entertain you from the potpourri perspective, okay? This Grand Cross, even though we have 3 of the 4 signs cardinal, in the fixed houses, it brings in a lot of security issues. And in potpourri houses, the nodes fall in the 2nd and 8th. This starts to emphasize that need to be secure.
Yeah.
And yes, we look at the 8 houses need to be secure in intimate relationships, but it brings up just even broader than that. I need to be secure within the chaos of my early family environment. I need to feel secure through relationships. There's a double emphasis on relationships here because, again, if you go back to Placidus, it just puts it all in the 7th house. The 7th house, this nodal axis, could be a little more interested in having relationship after relationship after relationship. You could be more willing to change relationships a little easier. If you put the nodes in that Saturn into the 8th house, this will make you stick out a relationship a little longer, sometimes longer than what is necessary for the health of you or the relationship. Again, it brings a little more insecurity into the picture for the 7th house Pluto. And then it makes this Uranus signature, you know, yearn for security, yearn for that container, Cancer, to hold me and make me feel secure in my world. Again, I'm not saying either is right or wrong. You're going to have to, you know, observe what works for you, where you feel comfortable. Regardless, as Uranus goes through the 3rd house, no matter what house it is, it can just trigger insecurity to that natal signature. It can trigger, you know, old emotional wounds. It can trigger old issues around who will love me, who will see me, who will understand me. And what this 3rd house transit then is going to say for you is you must be able to see yourself. You have to deepen your love for yourself through whatever is going on in your world. Sometimes you've just got to stop, slow down, take a deep breath and go, what is it that I want and need to make me happy, to make me feel good? And just asking that question then starts to prioritize all of that mental chaos into what's most important for you. Then that will help you prioritize your actions to feel better. And that will help calm down this natal Uranus signature. All right, makes sense?
Totally, yeah.
Questions with what I'm saying? Anything? Questions from the board as well. Anybody else has questions, you know, feel free to speak up.
Yeah, I know I will have also progressed Sun hitting my Uranus at the same time. So there is so much going on, you know.
Oh, yeah. That'll be part of that picture as well.
Yeah.
In regards to everything. You know, one other thing that I might bring up because of the 3rd house transit and the polarity to the 9th house, you know, your natal Jupiter is 0 degrees Aries.
Yeah.
So it brings a curiosity to study everything.
Yeah.
You know, it could be a signature for the internal student. I just want to keep growing and learning, and then I want to share what I learn, and then I want to grow and learn, and then I want to share what I learn. What you might have to be careful of, though, with the Jupiter with this signature is starting to learn everything but not comprehending it or not following through with it. Because Jupiter is the ability to assimilate and understand things. And when you put it in Aries, it can be start, stop. And when you put it 0 degrees Aries, and you put it last quarter square to this natal Uranus signature, okay? If you look at a new adventure or a new study and it doesn't agree with your beliefs or it triggers your own securities, in other words, let me say it a different way as well. Whenever you get emotionally triggered, the ability to assimilate and understand what's going on can get arrested.
Mm.
And so one of the things that might happen with this Uranus third house is every so often, as we spoke on the slides, the chaos can get so stirred up that you just, you have the involution, or you could even just have with this grand cross here an explosion of some type. I just got to release all this energy within me, but again, sometimes the more chaotic your world gets, the less you can process through the information. So with this Uranus transit, when it moves into the third with Placidus, or if you feel it's there now in some ways, it's very important to be able to calm down the chaos from time to time.
Yeah.
If not, calm down the chaos every single day. Because as I like to tell, as I say all the time in astrology, an astrologer, we look at this, we go, oh, she's a Taurus. No, you're half a Gemini. Sun in the third house. Oh, she's got Mercury in Taurus. That's really going to kind of calm down the mental processing. No, you have half of Mercury in the third house. So you're back and forth within yourself with just these planets in slow, steady eddy and racing ahead. And Uranus is going to stir all this up. And you've got to be able to know when you need to slow down.
Yes.
Okay.
And channel it into some creativity.
Yes, definitely. And channel it. And when you do that, when you slow down and get, steady in the process, this allows this natal Uranus signature to really be able to heal. It will lessen the insecurity, Uranus in Cancer. It will lessen the feelings of, chaos with cardinal planets, and it will just, it will a lot of what, you're meant to do. First, seventh house Pluto, first house polarity, you've really got to just learn how to be you, first house. And with that Grand Cross, you're deepening self-reliance. Don't assume that these Taurian planets are completely self-reliant. Uranus has got a lot to teach you when it goes over those 3 planets. And it's also going to open you up to a lot of things emotionally that you may have glossed over or compromised on with Moon Scorpio in the 9th house. And as it opposes this moon, which trines the natal Saturn, there's a lot of emotional awakening and understanding that can happen through this third house transit.
That's great.
Let me check in. Questions from you? Questions from anybody else? Volunteer? Any?
Well-behaved board at this point, Kim, so quiet.
They're not behaving in a third house way? Volunteer. Questions from you? Anything?
No, it's very interesting. I can feel the energy starting already. Increasing a lot of mental activity, insomnia too. So I definitely, even before hearing you, decided to calm myself and ground myself and be more in nature, and but also there is a lot of things I can anticipate that will be positive about that. Healing, you know, talking about trauma, healing some trauma. I feel also in my own work on myself some new awareness, and so it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. You know, Uranus is going to, you know, hit Sun, Moon, Mercury within the first 6 degrees. So there's a lot about yourself that's going to be evolving and changing.
And also I'm Aquarius rising, so it should
Mm-hmm.
affect me maybe in some way.
Yeah. You could maybe see a lot of personality shifting going on, you know. And, you know, not that 7th house Plutos aren't flexible. They can be very, very flexible, okay? But that South Node conjunct Saturn, regardless of whether it's 7th or 8th house, you know, that's very security orientated.
Oh yeah.
Just Saturn conjunct the South Node. And then in Virgo, you know, the insecurity and self-doubt that can come from Virgo sometimes. And so what I see with your Uranus transit in the 3rd is your ability to just be more flexible in the world.
Yeah.
And then learning to calm yourself down whenever you need to as well. But yeah, I'm sensing that Uranus is just going to open up opportunity for you in learning new talents that will bring in resources. And of course, before it finishes up the 3rd house in Taurus, it will trine this South Node and it will trine that Saturn.
Yeah.
So you may find that Uranus accelerates a lot of growth for you as it moves through the 3rd house.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kim Marie.
Oh, you're welcome. It's very nice to meet you over the phone, and thank you for letting us look at your chart in 2 different houses. And I went to the potpourri, you noticed?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I didn't know it at all. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. Usually you don't see a drastic change with different houses, but in your situation, it did show a lot of difference between Placidus and Porphyry.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And
thank you so much to both of you for everything, for your work tonight in particular.
You're welcome, and all the best in writing all those books over the next few years as well.
Thank you. If you post it.
You betcha. All right, let's move on now. And for those of you who haven't recognized it, I have transiting Uranus in the 3rd house. Excuse me. It's been in the 3rd house for a while, and I finally made peace with writing webinars. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to get to the book. These are my books. It's just my webinars. I can bullet point the words, and then I just get in there and do the 3rd house yak. So I've really noticed Uranus moving through the 3rd house and getting that swing of things with writing via webinars. And so thank you to all of you who like to study this way. So let's look at Uranus and Taurus then, starting to transit through the 4th house. You know, here we make a shift with passive polarity, cardinal, modality, and the element of water. So now we're looking at Uranus, Venus, Moon, or Aquarius, Taurus, Cancer, if you just want to put them all into the same archetypes via either planets or signs. When Uranus in Taurus moves into the 4th house, it's going to bring the emotional upheavals, emotional upsets, emotional chaos, you know, and the whole essence is going to be learning inner emotional self-reliance. That's Cancer in the 4th house lesson, emotional self-reliance. So Uranus doesn't come along and do it in a smooth, easy way. It has a tendency to bust things open into the consciousness. And so it will bust things up emotionally to draw us inward to create deeper inner emotional security. And because it's also then moving through Taurus, it's having us learn to create an inner physical security as well. So that self-reliance, that inner security here is physical Taurus and emotional 4th house. What can happen though is we can get emotionally stuck. Taurus 4th. Our emotional fears and insecurities can come to the surface and then we freeze. We get stuck in whatever emotional wound or pain might be there. And Uranus is bringing up the emotional wound and pain in order to be conscious of it, to heal it, to address it. And so, in essence, what Uranus will help us do with this Taurus 4th house transit is emotionally mature. I can meet all of my emotional needs myself. I can learn how to make myself happy, which is what the essence of Moon Cancer 4th house is about. Emotional self-reliance is relying upon ourself to be happy, to feel happy. And many times the 4th house is also the early childhood environment. And if it was not secure, say you have Taurus on the 4th house cusp, like I do, if your early environment was not, if it didn't feel safe and secure, I had a rageaholic father. I never knew when he was going to explode, Scorpio on the 10th. To the degree that you didn't feel your early environment was safe, it makes it hard to trust. And so what Uranus will be doing with this 4th house transit then is bring up all the ways in which we do not have a trust in ourselves, in which we don't trust the universe or even source energy, the ways in which we don't trust our environment. You know, how many of us grew up, not just 4th house, but how many of us have early environments where we had a raging and or violent parent or both parents? You know, it just can set you on edge, and that can carry into adulthood. If we don't emotionally heal, it gets carried into the 5th house with emotional displacements. So as Uranus upsets the apple cart emotionally with this house transit, it's really giving us the opportunity to come in and deeply love self, to honor the gut, to honor our instincts, to learn to trust self again. And with that, then we'll learn to trust the world again. Hey, I can be safe in my world. I can be safe in my environment regardless of what's going on in the universe. Of course, all of our family of origin traumas will surface as well. We will revisit, and I don't care how many times you've worked on them before, if you have Uranus transiting through the 4th house, it is going to bring up all the old emotional, familial traumas again, bringing them up to be healed, bringing them up to be processed through. So Maybe there actually was abandonment issues. Maybe one or both parents were either physically not there and or they were emotionally unavailable, or they just couldn't understand you emotionally. You know, when you look at the fact that many of us can be individuating and spirituating on a soul level, and we're born into consensus parents, they're not going to know who we are. They're not going to be able to understand us. And so the liberation of Uranus with this house transit is to be able to recognize that and then be your own parent. Love yourself. Being able to break free from the old family patternings, be able to maybe forgive the parents, to love the parents, who they are, as they are, because you're breaking free into parenting yourself, loving yourself, and meeting your own needs. You can't be any more Taurian self-reliant than when you do that. It is possible, depending upon the age you're at, to have the parents leave planet Earth, to have a parent die. My parents are going to be 80 and 85. I really look at that with Uranus getting closer and closer to my fourth house and going, when will this come about? I have two in-laws as well, so I am looking at the possibility of maybe 4 parents moving on when Uranus transits my fourth house in a few years. So the family of origin traumas, they'll be as varied as there are souls on the planet. It'll be looking at them on an individual way. Why is it coming up? What are the emotional upsets that are coming up to help you love yourself better, to help you become emotionally peaceful and stable Taurus within yourself? That's going to be one of the deepest, broadest intents of Uranus and Taurus through this house. If you are someone who has children, depending upon young children, you can have the chaos of the environment of just trying to raise them. You can have the lightning bolts of recognizing how you turned out to be just like your parent did with you. You're doing it with your children. How well can you break that pattern? If you have, you're older and you have adult children, it's possible you may be looking at your own transition. How are you maybe processing through end of life issues for yourself? Adult children, how can you still address old patterns with them and learn to see them uniquely as they are? I have this bullet. We're learning self-reliance with this transit, physical and emotional. And we have to learn it in order to teach it. You cannot teach something that you don't understand or something that you don't know. So again, deepening that physical, emotional self-reliance so that we can be an example or a role model for our own children. And of course, how well can we accept the individuality of our children? How well can we acknowledge who they are as unique souls and celebrate it? That could be one of the gifts that Uranus in Taurus through the fourth house could give to our children, is for us to be able to recognize that. Now, we all have money scripts, as they're called. We all have beliefs about money. We all have emotional relationships to money. If you're fear-based or poverty-based, you know, you may not have a good relationship with money. Money's scarce. There's never enough of it. If you have been working upon your beliefs and values around money and resources, which we will all be doing with Uranus and Taurus, you can be changing that emotional relationship with money into one of ease, into one of, you know, even abundance. In natural law, the universe is abundant. We just have all the patriarchal distortions that there's not enough to go around. Obviously, we only have so many resources on planet Earth. And Uranus and Taurus will help us evolve to learn how to use the resources better so that all can have enough for food, clothing, and shelter. But in the midst of all that is our emotional relationship with money. And it gets emphasized here. And the more we work on becoming inwardly self-reliant, the individuated consciousness that says, I am my own resource. As we can acknowledge and accept that, then we become able to create the resources that we need. And I like to say that we need and desire. We not only create the resources to survive, but we create the resources to flourish. However, our values want that to manifest. So this fourth house transit will have Uranus just shaking up our emotional relationship to resources. That will trigger us into what are our beliefs around money and resources, to then how do I change and evolve my values around that. You know, Leroy and I have been practicing, you know, we've went through, as I've had Uranus moving through the third house, I've had a lot of sporadic income, up, down, up, down, up, down. Yeah, you know, I'm self-employed completely. I never know what it's going to be from 1 month to the next. Well, since 2008, we've really worked to say, let's just really get a handle on expenses and minimize expenses as much as we want, so the chaos of the income isn't so frightening. Well, one of the mantras that Leroy and I, we have a composite south node in Taurus, okay? In the second house, by the way. Money comes to us easily and often. And this is a mantra that Leroy and I have said together and individually now for a good 5 years, if not longer. And we've made that mercurial effort to just, money comes to us easily and often. We just went right out there to the word money and said, why can't just money show up? And, you know, and so we play with it. I literally got a check in the mail for $1 from a food co-op that I used to belong to a long time ago. I ran into the house after getting the mail and I said, honey, 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 money comes to us easily and often with all the emotional emphasis. Look. And I showed him the check for $1. But it wasn't the amount of the money. It was the emotion and the feeling and, you know, the changing of the thought, third house, fourth house, that we put into it. And so we've gotten to the point where, you know, even if it's just my mother reimbursing me for groceries that I bought after they stayed with us all weekend, because that's what she likes to do, I still looked at it as money comes to me easily and often. That's something for the third house transit, by the way. That's where I honed in on that one. But you get the point here. There has to be a shift in that emotional relationship with resources. And for those of you who participated in the Chiron and Aries series, you know, whether we're manifesting a disease or we're manifesting a miraculous healing, or whether we're manifesting anything into the physical world. It starts with the spiritual realm and our beliefs. It trickles down into the mental plane and our thoughts and attitudes, and then it's emotionalized to condense into manifestation. And so, as I also said in the Chiron and Aries series, I have a little bit of a pet peeve with body, mind, spirit, because I go, where's the heart? And it's that emotional connection between non-physical and physical that determines how it's going to bring through into manifestation. So this is part of what Uranus has the potential to help heal through Taurus in the 4th house. To trust yourself, to then trust the universe, to trust in the abundance of the universe. And not to do the Taurian sitting on the couch, but to do the Taurian consistent effort as you are working to emotionalize the energy of resources showing up, however, whenever you need them. And of course, as we are also working with that emotional self-trust, self-reliance, etc., that gives us the courage, 4th house, to go out there into that 10th house polarity and do whatever's the next step in taking charge of our life and evolving our career as well. Inner security gives us outer security, not vice versa. And Uranus and Taurus is going to teach everybody that it is inner security first, outer security then follows through from there. Now, around issues of sexuality with Uranus and Taurus through this house transit, non-sexual touching is extremely important, and it must be the foundation for establishing safety and trust, especially as any emotional chaos or upsets come through. If we are in an intimate relationship, we must feel safe with someone. We must feel physically safe with someone before we can trust the exposure of our emotional vulnerability. And so if someone wants to use sexuality for security without including that emotional safety, it will then just turn into use and abuse of a partner. It will turn into all of the Taurus Scorpio manipulation and obsessive compulsive games that can be played. So with this house transit, again, non-sexual physical touch is one of the first steps in emotional healing. Well, that will then include the ability to touch ourselves, to meet our own physical needs, to meet our own sexual needs, to meet our own emotional sexual needs. By gosh, through Uranus and Taurus, there just better be some major news articles about masturbation, you think? Uranus is going to liberate it. Hopefully, at least in the westernized world. Maybe inching along in other places as well that are a lot more conservative, but you know, you can start to, I mean, all 12 archetypes are sexual. And so Uranus Taurus through the 4th, we've got to be responsible for it with ourselves. And again, then as we gain in that inner security, inner self-reliance, then we become more and more open to going out there into the world, 10th house and Scorpio, and risk learning how to relate to another if we're single, or how to deepen relationships with another if we're in a relationship. Hopefully you get the points that I'm trying to bring across. If not, again, you're welcome to ask questions on the board with Leroy, or he can pass things on to me as well. Distortions, there can be emotional trauma that paralyzes us. Uranus, Taurus, 4th house, emotional trauma, paralyzing. So we lose that ability to have the cardinal modality of moving forward. We become Taurian stuck. We can have emotional maturity keeping us stuck from growing up. It's too painful. It's too hurtful. I don't want to try. I just want somebody else to take care of me, 10th house polarity. Well, that's not going to be the healthiest in the long run. There can be an unwillingness to address the emotional fears. I don't want to look at things. I don't want to look at that. And if we have that kind of an attitude and try and do the Uranian suppressing it back down below the surface, it's sooner or later just going to create a bigger emotional explosion. We can have all kinds of emotional outbursts triggered by Uranus, and we can not want to process through, why did that happen? What did it mean? What's the source of those emotions and the emotional fear or insecurity? So we can, be part of the emotional immaturity where we just, continue to have emotional outbursts again and again and again, but we don't ever want to do anything about evolving or healing the emotional pain. All right, let's see what our next chart looks like. Leroy can unmute the volunteer. I got to take another drink. So here we have a female. I had to go back and look this up. I had actually had it in my head that the 3 Uranus-Pluto conjunctions were in 1965. No, there was one in 65 and there were 2 in 1966. The third one was June 30th, 1966 at 1606 Virgo. So this is a very, very tight Uranus balsamic Pluto conjunction. It's only 11 minutes from exact.
Kim?
Yes?
I just want to get our volunteer on the line here. She's on the phone. So volunteer number 2, you're going to want to enter #34 to get unmuted, I believe. Okay. There she is, I think. Go ahead, volunteer.
Did it work?
There you go.
Hey, we hear
Can
you.
you hear me?
Hello, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Oh, you betcha. You bet. Give me just a moment to tell everybody about your environmental conditionings, and then we'll jump in your chart, okay?
Sure.
So you were raised in a non-religious environment by Jewish parents. You were adopted, and you mentioned that, the whole adoption issue was a pretty big theme in your life. You were not really a good fit with your consensus parents. Mother was very fearful, selfish, controlling, manipulative, angry, outbursts. Father was quiet and depressed, but he would have bouts of rage that he would mask as discipline. Did you have siblings?
Yes, one older sister.
And was she adopted too?
No.
Okay, so that even puts something into the whole adoption theme as well. You expressed that you grew up angry, lonely, rebellious, hateful, drug rehab at 16. You did meet your biological father in early adulthood, and he encouraged you to go to college, and you got an accountant degree. I think you work as an accountant. There are fears regarding resources, a poverty consciousness to some degree. You had a 14-year marriage to a man who was 15 years older. You felt that you were physically and emotionally dependent upon him, even though you were wanting to break free. And then a couple of years ago, you had a brief relationship with a woman, and it was quite painful due to her verbal abuse and extreme of narcissism. So let me just share with everybody, again, we have a Scorpio soul here with 8th house Pluto. We have the Uranus and Virgo generation, balsamic Pluto. Pluto rules Uranus by house. Mercury is over here in Cancer, new phase Jupiter in the 6th. Mercury rules Uranus by sign here. And we have the Taurus on the 4th house cusp. We don't have Uranus there quite yet, so you probably related to a lot of the things we were speaking about with the 3rd house transit. And that kind of turns out to definitely be the case when we do the 1st house or one house and then the next house. It kind of bleeds over. But you too have 3 planets in Taurus. So not only are you in 8th house Pluto, you have the South Node in Scorpio, 10th, and of course it's balsamic conjunction to Neptune. The South Node is moving towards Neptune. So another planet conjunct the South Node here, the fruition, the relive, and perhaps mixture of both. When Neptune's conjunct the South Node, you know, one of the things that can easily bring in is an element of confusion. You know, Neptune works through cycles of confusion and clarity. And so sometimes Neptune conjunct the South Node is, what do I believe? What do I, you know, value on the deepest spiritual levels? And so it can bring in all the Scorpio confusion around intimacy relative to this 8th house Pluto as well. But I think what I may have been picking up on you is if the abortion issue was a theme, would you agree that part of that theme would be you know, abandonment issues, the abandonment by the biological parents? Would you agree with that, volunteer?
I don't resonate so much with the word abandonment. I mean, there was definitely a loneliness and a lack of safety, but
Was it more that, okay, I've been dropped into this family, but this really doesn't feel like my family? Is that more of
yeah.
what it's like?
I mean, there's definitely a longing for them, but I don't feel like I was unloved by them. By my, you know.
Sure, sure. Well,
maybe because I know the story, you know, by now, but.
Yeah, gotcha. We'll play with that, you know, because obviously as Uranus goes to the 4th house, it's going to bring up family of origin issues in some way or another. Because you're the second volunteer, I would just like to hear from you of everything that we spoke about, you know, in the first hour or so with, you know, Uranus moving through the 3rd house. Just out of curiosity, would you just share with us how you felt that the transit has been going? Obviously, you're still in the midst of it.
Okay, yeah, I really have a heightened nervousness, and I was having a lot of stress from my job, and I decided to take like a $20,000 pay cut to go to a lower paying job and be able to work from home. I don't know if that's I'm really trying to get rid of the stress there. And the other thing is I stay up until 2 a.m. I never used to be able to do this and go to work the next day, but I go to sleep at I sleep very little now. And I just think that's, I don't know if it's I think it's the nervousness. I can go to sleep if I want to, but I love to just stay up. And I talk entirely too much, so I'm stopping right now. The talking increased for sure.
Oh, that's no worries. No worries, you know, in regards to that. We won't hold it against you, okay? I got Uranus transiting my third house as well, all right?
Okay.
Yeah, so the notice of kind of the increase in the nervousness, you know, I make sure that I exercise. I've always been that way, but I got too many planets in Sag in the 9th house, okay? So because I've always been an exerciser, I've just realized with Uranus moving through my third that I've just got to have a certain amount of gym exercise every day just to keep my sense of feeling balanced there. So for both the other volunteer and for you yet, you know, whatever you've got to do to keep that nervous system calm, I would recommend it. I didn't mention this. I don't think I've mentioned this yet. So this is going to show up on this class and hopefully people will get it through the series. But years and years ago, I learned from Jeffrey's teachings that the herb for Uranus is faux tea root, FO-TI root. And faux tea root is an Oriental longevity herb, but it is known to calm the brain. It calms the nervous system. It helps all of the synapses in the brain function more clearly. And so for those who have Uranus transiting through the 3rd house, Uranus transiting through the 6th house, the Mercury houses, it could be quite helpful, okay, to consider faux tea root. It's not a sleeping herb. It's just something that helps the brain function better. Again, helps the brain and therefore the nervous system calm down. So I put that out there for what it's worth. Leroy is a 3rd house Pluto, and he has a south node in Gemini, and he has Mercury square the nodes. And he's someone that started taking faux tea several years ago, and I think he notices the difference when he's taking it and when he's not taking it for just keeping the nervous system energy calmed down. So there's your Uranian herb for anybody who, you know, is feeling the intensity of Uranus and you need to calm down. So volunteer, you have Venus at about 18 Taurus. You have the moon at 20 Taurus. They're both opposing Neptune retrograde at 20 Scorpio. And they're all conjunct South Node, as we spoke before. Neptune and Venus and moon conjunct that North Node in Taurus. Being an 8th house Pluto and lessons are the 2nd house polarity point. Your soul's evolutionary intent is self-reliance. You are here to learn Taurus. And I think that Uranus moving into Taurus for you over the next 7 years will bring more opportunities for growth than maybe you've had yet in this lifetime, just by nature of Uranus going through the 4th house. You can probably remember Uranus in Pisces going through your 2nd house as well, perhaps. And so you get Uranus both areas. You get it actually through that 2nd house, opposing Pluto, already done, been there, already done that, been there. But now you get one more chance with Uranus in Taurus. And I would really look at it as those as opportunities for you to just deepen self-reliance in every level. You know, going into the 4th house to just deepen it emotionally for you, so that all of the old traumas with mom and dad can, you know, just be forgiven and healed. Are you familiar with the Ho'oponopono prayer?
Yes.
Okay. For those who aren't, it's the Hawaiian forgiveness prayer. And it basically is under the premise it doesn't matter, you know, in the broad ways, who's responsible for what. If it's in your world, you've had some degree of co-creating it. And so it's just about forgiving yourself, forgiving others, just forgiving in general so that you heal. Now, I, in my readings of it, have shortened it into 4 points. I love you, or if it's too strong, I care about you as a human being. I am sorry for XYZ, and you just list the detail. Please forgive me. I forgive you. You can do it with yourself. You can do it with your parents. You can do it with your boss. You can do it with old lovers. You do it with everybody and everything that has been harmful or hurtful in your world. And you probably are familiar, you know, forgiveness is for yourself. It's to set you free. And I think that that is probably a good exercise to do for Uranus and Taurus transiting the 4th house, because then it sets you free emotionally. So you've got a little bit of a 1-2 punch in that you also have planets in Taurus that are going to be affected, but your Taurus planets are half Cancer. So your Venus is half Cancer, your Moon in Taurus is half Cancer, your North Node in Taurus is half Cancer, being in the 4th house. So you've just got, you know, double emphasis with these inner planets, Venus ruling all the Taurus energy, and the Moon, to really work on not only the soul self-reliance, but to work on your own inner emotional self-reliance as well, as Uranus moves through that 4th house. If I remember correctly, father's deceased, and you've just been able to go through some forgiveness work with him, correct?
Yes, I really feel like I got totally okay with my dad recently.
Oh, and
Yeah.
and are you talking? You're talking your stepfather, right, or your adopted father,
My
right?
adopted, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And an adopted mom is still alive, but in her 90s, correct?
Probably 80s. Yeah,
Oh,
somewhere close to.
80s. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
in the 80s.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
actually, she's 81. Yeah.
Okay, 81. Okay, I might have gotten you mixed up with the parents thing mixed up with the other one. So, you know, I would say that let's see if she makes it through Uranus to your 4th house before she passes. You know, that could be a possibility of what's going to happen. Again, we could have, you know, figurative you know, end of life issues with a parent. We could have literal end of life issues with a parent. Interestingly enough, just for you, volunteer, my ascendant is 2135 Capricorn.
Oh, wow.
My 3rd house is 6 something Aries, and my 4th house cusp is 13 something Taurus. So I'm right there with you with those house transits, sweetie. I'm right there with you with all these conversations I spoke earlier, you know, with my parents now in their 80s. It's the same thing as I look at you know, Uranus in Taurus, and then getting closer and closer to that nadar, you know, well, one or both of my 2 little Libra codependent parents cross over. You know, how closely will they cross over together? For you, it might be just mother. Now, Uranus, of course, going over your Venus. One more signature for you to really step into your self-reliance. And then Uranus going over the moon. One more signature to really step into your own emotional self-reliance. And then as it goes over this north node towards the end of the cycle, it's just going to reiterate that emotional self-reliance from the moon itself. You really are in the process of moving forward to feel comfortable in your own skin, to feel comfortable in your environment, to feel comfortable in your world. And by the way, you know, I just want to say congratulations for switching jobs and valuing inner peace, you know, more than the almighty dollar. It's not an easy thing to do.
No.
But, you know, congratulations. You may find that as Uranus transits through the fourth house, you may be able to find even more work you can do out of your home. That's another archetype for Uranus transiting through the fourth house, especially when it's in Taurus. And Taurus, you know, those talents we learn, Taurus is the sign of the entrepreneur. And you put it in the fourth house. And if did I hear you correctly with this job switch? You now get to work out of your home?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm all set up to work.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
Have you ever thought about hanging out your own shingle?
I would love to, but I've just never had the probably
Courage.
the confidence.
Uh-huh.
Confidence and the drive, or I always talk myself out of any idea. Any
Pluto
idea
Virgo.
I have, I just start.
Pluto Virgo.
Oh, is that it?
You know that Uranus balsamic Pluto up here in Virgo, you know what this is about? This is about releasing self-doubt. This is really about being able to shed self-doubt, any sense of powerlessness, to work on the self-reliance. So this metamorphoses into self-empowerment. So this could be one of the best opportunities ever for you. Not only Uranus going through Taurus fourth, but even when it moves into Gemini fifth someday, okay, there's opportunities here for you to really empower yourself to become your own boss. You have the potential, honey. And no one's I know what you're saying with the confidence and the courage, but part of the lessoning for the Pluto Virgo generation is we're never going to be perfect enough to do it. We just got to do it. And
there's
so
also a fear, the fear of resources. Like when you were talking earlier about inconsistent money, I was like, yeah, I hate that. I can't do that. Can't do that.
Well, hey, I want you to know that the first time that I tried to be self-employed, I called it my Peace Corps days. I was doing environmental politics, and it was nice to be free and be my own boss, but there wasn't any money in it. And I literally went back to an 8-to-5 job for another 8 years. And then I think I was in my mid-40s when I finally, got the courage to try it a second time. If it's not there for you to really find that inner courage or self-reliance to do it, I want you to work on it emotionally and mentally to set it up for a future life. Because the chart is saying this is what you are to do. You've got, Saturn here in the second house. And it's, the courage to heal the wounding of being able to do it yourself. And so Uranus is going to open all this up emotionally to help you move past some of that inner confusion and self-doubt and worry, the potential is screaming out of your chart. So do not judge yourself, Virgo, if you don't do it.
Oh,
Just continue to work on the emotional and mental courage to move in that direction. Because again, as we've learned in the Pisces 12th house teachings of EA, it's not whether we succeed, it is whether or not we make the effort. In other words, Jeffrey Green's teachings would say, Source doesn't judge us by outcome. Source learns to discern our effort. So if you're making the effort, Virgo, no matter how small the baby step is, to find some courage to do this entrepreneurial thing, a little more and a little more and a little more, that's all that matters from the perspective of evolution. Got that?
Yep.
All right.
I do. Thank you. I do. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, we're going to go continue to heal more layers with mom and dad and your sister, family, more layers. The other thing about 4th house, 10th house is learning to, not only parent ourselves, but to search for a relationship with Universal Mother and Universal Father. And so you could just start opening up to, the grandmothers and the grandfathers as to be there supportive of you in a parental guiding role from a spiritual basis. And that would be healing with Uranus in this 4th house. And you have the natural ability to call in, grandmothers, grandfathers. You have that ability to call in spiritual beings to help you re-find, courage to do your thing in the world. And then, that will help heal, any of the family of origin woundings, any woundings from being adopted, anything in regards to a child where you didn't feel secure. Uranus is going to open all those subjects up so that you get to look at the origin of it, why it happened, and of course with those Taurus planets in the 4th house, some of the reason why it happened was for you to learn how to love yourself, for you to learn how to take care of your own needs, for you to learn how to parent yourself. And with the polarities back to that Neptune South node, again, for you to establish the relationship with Universal Mother, Father. And then all the human-made stuff can just kind of soften up, and calm down and, be more peaceful so it's not triggering anymore. Even Uranus at 29 degrees Pisces is another signature for learning a relationship with Universal Father. And so, depends on what your languaging is, but for me, I've always, somewhere early along in my life, in my church-going days as a child, young adult, no, adolescent to be more correct, I just adopted the word spirit, and that's always just been my word for source. And when I say spirit, I just mean male, female, mother, father, God, blah, 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 whatever, all the words everybody uses. To me, it's just become like an energetic force that's not necessarily just male or feminine. It's the energy of both. And, I would really be working to call upon that energy, because that's where your real courage and confidence will come from. Your polarity point is Pisces by sign. And so you have to be second house grounded in a relationship with source energy, Pisces. And it's also learning to recognize. And by the way, I have Pisces and Virgo intercepted in my second and eighth house right with you. And I'm in eighth house Pluto and Virgo too, okay? My nodes are just the opposite. My south node is Taurus and my north node is Cancer. But what I've learned with this Pisces intercepted in the second is really being able to recognize that that ultimate resource is source itself. You know, so again, I've been self-employed this almost 2 decades, I think, just shy of 2 decades, you know, and I've gotten to the point, you know, okay, source, I need some clients, bring me some readings. You know, or, and sometimes I go, okay, source, I'm a little exhausted. I need a little break from clients for a little bit, okay? And I literally will carry on conversations like that with source energy in regards to resources. Yes, you too. Start to have those types of conversations and, you know, recognize the spiritualization of resources with this Pisces second house polarity point. And then Uranus going through the fourth house is going to help you feel more and more emotionally secure in your relationship with resources, Taurus. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, ultimately, the lesson will be to feel more secure, but it was kind of puzzling when you said going through the fourth house. And I'm not an astrologer, but a practicing astrologer. But when you say Uranus going through the fourth house will bring security, it sounds like, what? But that's the ultimate after the upheaval, right?
Yeah, that's the intent. Uranus is to decondition and liberate. You want to decondition from insecurity, and you want to liberate into security.
Mm-hmm.
Got it?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And guess what? It's an inside job. You know, and Taurus and the fourth house are both passive polarity, energy moving back to the center, energy moving inside. And so, yeah, Uranus is going to decondition you through the insecurities. And, you know, go for it. Don't fall into the fear of Uranus is just going to upset things even more. You know, Uranus is going to bring an upset or two along. I think collectively, all of planet Earth has some resource upsets to go through with money. We can't have these extremes of wealth inequalities. We've got to have more distributions. For the most part, over the long term, if enough of us wake up, I think we can really, on the broad levels, have more financial security. Again, it's the part 1 series, or I put there's a YouTube lecture I did on public banking. You know, I'm big into that for all of us having more financial security. But as we work through these 12 houses, I'm kind of working on that personal perspective for every volunteer. And you have all the potential in the world, honey, to really create inner security with Uranus, Taurus, fourth house. Claim it. Go for it. Do your affirmations. Make your self-hypnosis tape. Have you heard about that?
About self-hypnosis? Yeah.
Jeffrey Green's old self-hypnosis tape. I'll put it on the end of the PDF. So, and Leroy will correct me if I'm wrong. I put it all the way through the Chiron Transiting Houses series. You know, there's affirmations that we do on a conscious level, but then we have to work to change and reprogram the unconscious mind, which is Uranus. And the way to do that is through, you know, you can do it through past life regressions, you can do it through hypnosis. Jeffrey put out an exercise where we would create our own self-hypnosis tape that we would play at night when we go to sleep to reprogram the unconscious. You could be a prime one for that with Neptune conjunct the South Node. I'll put that exercise out there, and I'll put it at the end of this PDF. So when the materials come out at the end of this 6-part series, you can look for that, and anybody can practice with it, because, you know, Uranus is how all of us are wanting to reprogram the unconsciousness. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. Do you have any questions for me? Anything about your chart?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank you for volunteering your chart, and I wish you all the best, and I'll be right there with you as we watch this Uranian transit through our charts. Let me just check in with Leroy and see if there's any comments or questions from him, the board, anybody else. I see that we've kind of gotten to our time. And my husband's being silent, so I'm going to say that. All right, everybody, welcome to getting through the first 2 of our classes. You can join us next week if you want to just hang in here and learn some more about Uranus and Taurus transiting through all 12 houses with the archetypes if you want to. We'd love to have your participation for that. Here is the Saturn and Capricorn series that we did. It's on our website under the forecasting webinars drop-down menu if you want to catch up on Saturn. Archetypes and cycles is one part all by itself, but you can get each of these house webinars separately or together. And of course, as we said before, same thing with Chiron. These 2 webinars are together as one part, and you can get you could get your own personal Chiron Aries transiting house, or you can get the house series if you want. All right, thank you, everyone. That's all the slides for tonight. Thank you to our volunteers again, and have a good weekend, and look forward to seeing you next week.